Welcome back, everyone. It's 12:30. Let's get underway. We have R4, but just before we get to R4, I'd like to bring to everybody's attention, we have a meeting at 1:30, and we have R4 and a closed session, which we have to address today because I think some of these items are going to this afternoon's board due to timing issues. So with that, Mr. Robbins. Oh, you first.
Thank you, Mr.
Wow.
Chair. For those that are joining us remotely, sorry, we may still have audio problems. Nothing we can do at the moment, so I'll try and speak up as best I can and encourage everybody else to do the same. R4 is a report from Legislative Services Division with regards to local government incorporation and restructure. There is a multi-part recommendation before committee. I'd be happy to provide the Coles notes and some high-level backgrounder for the committee, if you'd like. So thanks for the opportunity then to provide a layout of an approach that for a potential restructure and incorporation study. We're fortunate to be able to tap into some current studies that are happening within two other regional districts, so it's very timely, and so much of what is in the report is informed by some current studies that are going on right now in two regional districts. Ms. Miles Wilson, Ms. Mohan, and Ms. Bowen might provide some commentary as well, because there's a number of pieces of this that they have some comment and some expertise and some thoughts on as well. What I did want to touch on was really a big part of this is the backgrounder and really the history of this kind of study. If you look at the backgrounder section, you'll recall that we're working on a November 23rd, 2022 board meeting resolution, but that's not where this began. Back in February 2022, the board endorsed pursuing a renewed restructured incorporation study. And I say renewed because then we go back in further history back to 2008, and then in 2009 when a preliminary study was tabled. Since that time, nothing has moved the goalposts, if you will, for any types of options there might be in terms of restructure until the board back in February 2022 approached the ministry for a potential study and revise, if you will, and revisit what happened back in 2008, 2009. At that time, though, the ministry and the province recognized that you were into a local government election and that they were not interested or prepared to fund or to look at requests for any type of restructure study. So there's a bit of a Coles notes. The study back in 2009 is available, and there's a link to that, and that provides some good backgrounder as well. So the report also taps into what was happening in 2008, 2009, and much of the work that was done, especially when it comes to communications, and what will eventually be, if this advances, is a comprehensive communication strategy as one of the components. But what was done back in 2008 and 9 again informs what potentially can happen going forward, and it also informs what costs might be associated with moving forward with a governance and services study. The other part of the current resolution that we're working from the board involves a rationale, and Ms. Miles Wilson had prepared, and it's attached as an appendix to the report, provides a bit of a background for the ministry to look at in terms of making overtures to them to help steer the process, participate in the process, and of course provide some limited funding to this process. And so again, in sum, this is based upon some real-time information we're getting from other regional districts that makes it helps inform this. It really helped shape a bit of the costs associated with it. And I'll leave it at that, and I turn to my colleagues if they want any other preliminary discussion or comments before we answer some questions.
So what I think I'll do is I'll start with Ms. Mohan. If you have anything to add to the Coles notes, then I'll go to Ms. Bowen, and then I'll go to Ms. Miles Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to the directors. This is The costs associated with this study came to light as part of the report preparation and exceeded what our expectations are around the cost of the study. And as a result, we've been working closely with finance to try and figure out what would be the appropriate funding mechanism for these additional costs. So you'll note that the report, and we're up against a time deadline, so we have some time pressure to submit to the province what our intentions are around this. So I wanted to just point out that the recommendation that is in the report suggests funding out of Function 130, which is a function called feasibility studies, and it's the contributing funders are the electoral areas, and it identifies a reserve of $70,000. So subsequent to the report being completed, we are we're not 100% sure that we can use those reserves for that funding. So there is a possibility of funding out of Function 250. And so Function 250 is also a function which is has contributions from the electoral areas. And if we did that, the entire amount would be done through requisition. So I think that what we want to make clear from this report is that it can be funded, but it's the extreme likelihood that all of the funding would come from requisition, and a small likelihood that we might be able to supplement with reserves. But you should count on funding through requisition for the entire 190,000 at this point. So whether it be from 130 or 250, and we'll sort that out.
Thank you, Ms. Mohan, and I just bring up Function 100 and go to Ms. Bowen. Ms. Bowen, anything to add?
There's not too much more I can add to that, but I can just say that if we fund it through the 250 or 130, it's going to be 96 cents per 100,000 for electoral area. So that's the increase. And it'll be all non-electoral areas that would be paying into it.
Thank you. Ms. Miles Wilson.
The only other thing I'll highlight is in discussion with municipal affairs staff. They do, if the board does want to proceed or a committee does want to proceed with this, they do need the funding request submitted in the form of a rationale as soon as possible. They would be considering a grant by March 31st, and probably by the first or second week of April, they would give word of whether that is approved. So there is a timeline associated with this, not just for incorporating to our budget, but for them to provide a grant.
Thank you. Anybody else want to go on the speakers list? Okay, so I'll tell you what I have so far. I've got Director Acton, Stone, Justice, and McClinton. Okay. Aren't you glad we took a break and came back afterwards? Go ahead, Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Most people here at the table have recognized that the governance structure for South Cowichan is not working well, and so I'm really appreciative to staff for supporting this and for all the work that they've done so far. Is definitely something that was very apparent to me the moment I moved to Shawnigan Lake, and I asked around, and I was given a huge stack of papers about this big, and it was kind of overwhelming to go through it all, the history, and it's definitely on the community's mind constantly of just, how can we do things better? And so supporting this allows us to get some information so that we can bring that information to the community and be able to understand what we're talking about, or how do we recognize when we've arrived there? What do we need to do in order to get there now and to mitigate, all the issues that we have at the moment. So I really hope that my colleagues at the table will help support us in this way. This may be a little dramatic, but I was listening to a podcast on my way here today, and it was this guy had been sentenced to death row for 30 years for a crime he hadn't committed. And it's, we are kind of stuck in this structure that's not designed for us, and we're being punished for it in the South. And I do believe that we feel it because we're not able to, anyway, it's all in the the rationale. So I hope that my colleagues around here will support staff moving forward on this. It's really important to the south and then to other lying communities as well. And I hope it's not a political issue, that we think of this as a third of the population of our region that is affected, and that we think of the health and the well-being and what's best for the community so that we can continue to thrive in the best way that we can. So thank you.
Just to recap, I've got Stone, Justice, McClinton, Wilson, Segal, Douglas, and Martman. Director Stone, please.
Just a question through to staff. I think the title might be a little presumptive. In these cases, is it not true that sometimes the recommendation and what's found out of a governance and service study will actually lead towards the other governance outcomes like redistricting of boundaries or combinations of electoral areas, that if it isn't effective to look at incorporation, that may not be the resulting recommendation out of the study?
I can answer that, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Miles Wilson.
Thank you. So yes, through the chair to Director Stone, that is correct. This is a governance servicing study, not assuming the end result. There would likely be a series of recommendations for consideration. They would look at potentially boundary improvement districts. They'd be looking at potentially incremental steps towards incorporation possibly in the future, but there's multiple options that would most likely be looked at in a study such as this.
Thank you. And just to follow up, if I may, I knew the answer, and that's why I asked it, because I think there can be a misunderstanding that this is a, all no holds barred drive toward incorporation. I think that would be an unfair way to characterize it. It's taking a deep look at the challenges and opportunities, especially in these South End areas. I can't speak for the directors in area D or E, but I'm sure there will be some involvement with adjacent electoral areas to sort of understand where things might work. I know we hear from a resident of area B who's more involved and located in area E who has some issues. That may be some of the things that come out of the study, maybe even as interim steps. So the funding issue, I think I'll let the electoral area directors sort of discuss a little bit further, but from the study perspective, I support it in principle. It's more about where the funding comes from, and I think that's a decision for our colleagues that would be paying. But I would support the governance and servicing study.
Thank you, Director Stone. Director Justice.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question pertaining to cost. I was going to ask a very similar question to Director Stone with respect to the scope of the study, and I guess it is ostensibly a governance study, but it really seemed to me as I was reading through it that it might be the beginning of an incorporation study. So I'm glad for clarity on that. But with respect to the cost of the study, the two regional projects that are going in parallel that you've used for modeling the cost, in particular the regional district of Nanaimo, they're spending a similar amount, $250,000, to do, I guess, a similar study on restructuring, governance, and servicing, just for one single area of 7,000 people. So this is, I guess, for three areas of closer to 22,000 people. So is the $250,000 going to be enough for that, or is the regional district of Nanaimo really spending a lot more than they need to be?
Mr. Chair, I think it's a balancing act. I think there's economies of scale, if you will, that you will get from the participating areas, and so there is not triple, if you will, the work that needs to be done. There is a standard approach. We lay out the kind of approach, the approach that's been endorsed by the province, and we're confident that that budget will be sufficient, despite the fact that there are 3 areas. Really, the biggest part of this budget that is pushing it is our capacity internally to help manage this. We just don't have the capacity to do it. And so a large portion of this budget is to consider bringing somebody on board, in addition to the consultant, to help manage the project and manage a lot of the logistics. There's lots of outreach and communications that requires a lot of coordination and a lot of management. And that's really one of the big cost factors, in addition to the cost associated with a consultant coming in and synthesizing everything that is being done throughout this process. It isn't the consultant's responsibility, for instance, on the logistics, making sure that we have facilities for people to gather, to make sure that there is collateral material that is being presented, that their agendas are prepared, that minutes are prepared. When we look back at the 2008, 2009 work, there's a considerable amount, and we drew on all of that work that was done and the amount of work that was done. We just couldn't do that internally. And so that's really what is one of the driving parts of that budget.
Ms. Miles Wilson?
And through the chair and building off of Mr. Robbins' comments too, I think the other thought is that extensive amount of work did occur in 2008 and 2009 producing the study. So we're hopeful that if this does proceed, a consultant can build off the foundation of work that was already done, which was very comprehensive. So that would help give them a bit of a head start as opposed to the newer work without that foundation in the other regional districts.
All right, thank you. May I have a brief
Follow-up? Sure.
So, yes, I guess there's a part of the budget is the staff resourcing costs of $100,000, I guess, for that supplemental person. But is the idea that that's going to fully cover the cost of the regional government shepherding this project through, or is it anticipation that it's going to require more staff resources in addition to that?
Mr. Robbins?
Mr. Chair, based on what we know and what we have done and what the Regional District Nanaimo and the Regional District Okanagan-Similkameen have done, we believe that would be sufficient to shepherd this project through.
Director McClinton next.
Through the chair, I want to thank Director Stone for asking that question. It answered one of my questions. Just curious how long we would expect this study. When might it be completed?
Mr. Robbins?
Mr. Chair, if we rely on the 2 other regional districts and the previous work, you're talking 12 to 18 months.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Does that conclude your remarks? Director Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm glad there's a couple of questions which have already been asked. I've got on my list here.
Director Wilson, can you lean right in, please?
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Can you hear me, Ben? Okay. So with the staff, the extra staff that would be taken on, that would be on a contractual basis?
Mr. Robbins?
Certainly. We have a specific window of time with which we would need the horsepower.
Good. And the $60,000 contribution from the province, it's not a given that we would actually get that. Is that correct?
Nothing is a given in life, I would suggest, Mr. Chair. We've had outreach to the province and have had encouraging discussion with them with regards to that particular figure.
Okay. And the last follow-up, please, Mr. Chair, would be, can we ask for more?
We could always ask for more.
Yeah.
Ms.
And we
Miles
certainly
Wilson?
will.
What number do you have in mind?
So in the conversations with municipal affairs staff, definitely their standard contribution is 60,000. We can definitely ask for more and provide a very persuasive request, but I would say they're very much stuck to that number of 60,000 from what I understand.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much. It's always nice to ask. They can only say no. Leave it at that for the time being. But one of the things that has come up, and this is a comment more than a question, is that this is a governance study. It's not an incorporation study. It's 12 to 18 months just for the report. then there's all sorts of other things. And I think we need to make it clear to a lot of people, and this is what I'm trying to do here, that any public consultation will take place during that report, when they're preparing that. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, yes, a lot of the work is done with outreach and consultation with the affected areas. And that would be part of that timeframe.
Okay, so just given the time, I would love to be able to put this on to next year, but given that it's going to take 12 to 18 months, I think we should just go ahead and do the study, and that's all it is. Thank you.
Director Segal.
Thank you. I first heard about incorporation from the first moment I engaged with community in Mill Bay. It's definitely been talked about for a long time. And I think all the electoral areas can agree that the regional district model isn't great anymore and that the Local Government Act would be great if that could be modernized. That's not happening. And so this is an opportunity we have to look at different models, different ways of governing, and whether that's becoming a municipality or something totally different. I think it's important to figure out what serves our community best. And the results from this study, could outline the path that might actually help all areas in the future with the struggles that we all share. So I hope the board would support this. And just for the public to understand, this study is to engage community. This is to understand what, the needs of our improvement districts, the needs of community groups, and understanding the best model of governance for all of us in our growing population. This will only be successful if we have good community engagement. So, and it costs money to host all of that. So I really thank the staff for the support and their great rationale, and I hope we can ask the province for more money. Thanks.
Thank you, Director. I've got Directors Douglas, Martman, and myself. Director Douglas.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm glad to hear the clarification provided by staff and some of the directors here that this is a governance study rather than assuming that incorporation is going to move ahead. Obviously, that would be one of the potential options, but glad to hear it's a broader governance study. I did have a couple questions with regards to the report. So one of them is, and I think, Mr. Robbins, you clarified this, but I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. So in terms of the impact on staff and resources with undertaking this study, there is a few references in your report to the impact being fairly significant in terms of the commitments with CBRD time and resources. But if I understood your answer to Director Justice correctly, the $100,000 for resourcing an additional staff person would cover that. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, that's correct, yes.
And so one of my concerns in initially reading the report was we're doing our strategic planning session next Friday. And, I was concerned that if we're deciding on a project now, that's going to impact what we're going to be able to include in that strategic plan. But based on this, it sounds like the two can be separated to a certain extent. I'm seeing nodding.
I think that's an affirmative.
All right. Hey, the last question, Mr. Chair, is just with regards to the rationale, and this isn't something we have to sort out now, but I'm just wondering if there may be a benefit in discussing this perhaps with the planning staff here at the regional district, but there is a reference to greater control over the planning process and growth and development through incorporation, and I get the point there, but there is a reference to subdivision approvals, and it's taken me about 8 years on municipal council to figure out some of these details, but there are some nuances with the subdivision approval process and the approving officer and what their powers are under the Land and Title Act and the ability of elected officials to influence that. So happy to share any information we have from the municipality, though I'm sure planning staff here have a pretty good understanding of it, but that's a nuance that I think, just a suggestion to the South Cowichan directors, you may want to make sure is covered adequately in this study.
Thank you, Director Douglas. I think when the regional district approached the ministry a few years ago about that very topic. We got to a point where we thought we had a really good understanding and then no. So important point, and especially for this study going forward.
Yeah, and I'll just say again, I've been counselor 8 years and just learned some of the additional information on this recently. So there is some nuance that obviously can take a while to get a handle on.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
I've just keeping in mind, it's kind of neat when you get to sneak an extra question in here and there, but we're really running out of time, folks. So please be succinct and hold your questions to a couple if you can. Director Martinman.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for those comments. I'll try to keep it short. I do have a couple questions for staff because I wasn't quite clear on Ms. Mohan's comments. She was breaking up just a little bit. And so the question I have is around the funding of this. Can't you just clarify that this requisition is going to go across all electoral areas, districts, or not? And the other part of that question is about what is the impact, I guess, if something doesn't go through? Or if something does go through, does it get paid back or not? Thank you.
Ms. Mohan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Director Martman. So yes, the funding options presented in the report involve all 9 electoral areas paying for the study, and that the way it works is if there is a resulting incorporation, then the areas participating in incorporation would be obligated to reimburse that funding. But if the study goes forward and there's no resulting incorporation, then the cost is borne by all the electoral areas.
Follow up?
Second question.
That note, she answered them. I just have, so here's my focus. I hear everybody and their talks about this, embarking on a path. We may or may not get to incorporation. It's just one of the, I guess, one of the outcomes. My area is looking at a 17% plus increase in requisition this year. I can't add anything else to that. This is substantial. Just more money being spent, and I do really feel for this in principle. I think the autonomy of a group and able to move forward is important, but I just can't. My community would not be in favor of paying for something like this. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have a resolution on the floor. I've got myself, Director Nicholson, and I will go to Director Acton when we have spoken. So I'm going to try and be quick. So firstly, and I've been doing a lot of reading lately, do we know what jurisdictions paid for the previous work that was done in 08-09?
Okay, so through Mr. Chair, yes, we've been able to confirm that previously the study was paid for out of Function 250 by all electoral areas.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of how that actually, like what the actual costs were per area, then we'd have to do some analysis and look back at the records.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to raise this, and I hope it's not a surprise for my colleagues and the town of Lake Cowichan, but if there were, when I was first elected, part of the interest in FI in the town in what was going on in the South Cowichan was the potential lessons that could have been learned for the western part of the region. And I'm just going to pose this question. I don't need an answer, but if FI and the town were to embark on a study like this, how's that going to be paid for? Because it's sub-regional. Do we get everybody on board for that one? And like I say, I don't need an answer for that one. And the next question is, if this proceeds to the board, and I know we've been having discussion about votes and weighted votes and the like, how will this be considered in regards to voting? It's a financial matter. Is everybody involved, even though it's electoral areas that are going to be paying for it? Mr. Robbins.
My understanding is it would be a one director, one vote.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Boy, I'm having a hard time on this one. For the financial reasons, and not because Area E, I mean, we could find funding, I'm sure, but the issue for me is we've got all sorts of other huge issues facing us, and we're going to divert attention to a governance study. And I think a governance study is needed. We all have these issues, but I would need to see a study that would do two things. One would really seriously look at governance in terms of the new and challenging issues that we're facing as we move ahead. So we all know roads are an issue. They've been an issue for years. But we've also got these, as we talked about earlier this morning, we've got different climate stuff happening now. And so we need to really think about, I know we got a letter from someone about Coke Silo watershed. That is a huge, important thing. And it plays right into this. So it has this whole discussion really does involve Area E as much as any of the other areas if we're talking about governance and managing into the future. And then there is a huge opportunity here if it goes ahead, as Director Seagull said, is to use it as a way of building community. We need to build resilient communities, and having people come together and talk about these issues would be fabulous. But it can't be just about this narrow way we've been doing business and we need to be a municipality kind of a discussion. It needs to be seriously about the things that we're going to be dealing with in the future. So I am really torn because from my perspective, it's kind of a risky thing to do when we could be investing this money in more concrete climate action things would be my preference. But yeah, I'm torn.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. I go to Director Acton. I think she has a motion in mind. Please.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate everyone's candid support, and I can appreciate the question of funding. The importance that Director Nicholson spoke about, I think those issues would come out of the study as well. I know that.
Director Atkin, could you move
Anyway,
the motion
okay,
and then
so
you can have a
motion.
comment, please?
Oh. Anyway, I think I'm looking to staff to help kind of clarify the funding part, because it looked more clear before the meeting, and we've received some new information, such as, not sure we can use the feasibility study, et cetera. And also clarity on, could this be considered a planning exercise because it's about our communities? In the past, Area B has used part of a parks budget for these types of things. So just wondering if all items have been explored.
Ms. Bowen?
Through the chair to Director Acton, under the community planning, it would not be able to be under that function because that is for community planning. This is not community
I
planning.
cannot hear all that comments. Thanks.
Right to my mouth. How's that? Is that better? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we can't use the funds through function, the community planning function, so which is 325. And it's all electoral areas that would be paying into it. This is what happened to the last time. So that's where we need to make sure that we're putting it through the right spot before we can say 100%. So that's why we're saying to tax requisition for the 190, and then we will figure out exactly where it's going to lie.
I guess I was getting at, like, even if it was just A, B, and C somehow that could fund it, does it have to be all electoral areas? Like, can I address our future thinking? Like, at the moment, all the issues that we have, having these answers are, as far as I can see, the only thing that's gonna help us in the future. So, anyway. But yes, the A, B, and C, is there a way for just A, B, and C to pay for it?
Through the chair to Director Acton, I'll have to investigate that more to see if there is if that is available.
So I'm going to step in here. We've got a recommended resolution from our staff that I think gives a potential path forward, and timing is everything. So I'm going to suggest that the resolution that's been printed be moved and seconded and test the House. Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion, or is there any discussion on the resolution? And I'm going to ask for new information, please. Director Justice, Martman, and McClinton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was, the point that, that Director Nicholson raises, I think is a really important one, and I'd say, I'm wondering whether we might want to consider postponing this until after we've had our strategic planning discussion. I'm wondering about whether or not, for example, this South Cowichan Governance and Services study would be complementary to some form of regional or even bio-regional growth strategy, or whether it would preclude such a thing. And I think that's just one of the sort of questions that's going through my head right now, and it may be that thinking about this through a strategic planning session would answer some of those questions.
So thank you, and I'm going to ask folks to focus on the resolution that's before us. We've already kind of punted that one around a little bit, so we have a resolution on the floor. I'll go to Director, it's Martman, then McClinton, then Wilson. Director Martman.
Hi there. Thank you, Chair. So I don't want to repeat things, so I'm going to try to sum things in a way that gives a point of view and a perspective. And I think what it comes down to is the very essence of what Area A, B, and C are trying to get to. And that's some autonomy, or more autonomy over their direction and what they can do in their area. And here I sit as a director for Area H, and I'm facing a vote of 16 directors, and that's going to tell us about how we are going to spend money. And I'm going, wow, what autonomy is that? This doesn't even go to an electoral area where it's out of 9 and I have, the mutual electoral areas around me. And I'm feeling, just from a structural perspective, that, I'm going to be paying for the incarceration of Director Acton's, or her previous analogy of, the sort of the incarceration. And I going like, I just, something does not feel right here, and I just cannot move forward and vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Martman. Director McClinton and Wilson will close this discussion.
Through the chair, yeah, the idea that, first of all, a group of people has the right to self-determination, and I think we need to figure out a way for that group to pay for the services they use. That is the whole point of the CVRD. You pay for the services you use, and to be asking the other areas, especially areas like Thetis Island that are already reeling from regional rec, stuff that they're definitely not using. Again, I would agree with my colleague that this feels very unfair. However, I'd be very much in support of moving forward if there's a way for Area A, B, and C to pay for this. So as the motion stands, I would not be able to support it.
Director Wilson to close.
Boy, oh boy. Mr. Chair, I hate vacillation, and that's exactly the situation I find myself in right now. I'm going backwards and forwards, and the more arguments I hear, especially this latest one about areas A, B, and C only contributing, would turn me against this one completely, because then it would be another huge burden on our taxpayers. And at the moment, I'm going to go back to my original, which I said, I think right now this is not the time for this. And I apologize to my fellow directors from Area A and B, but in this particular case, my mind has been changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wilson. I'm not going to take any further comments. I'm going to have Mr. Robbins read the resolutions. Oh, Director Toporowski in the top right corner. Do you have something new to add?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if we're, putting the cart before the horse and looking at the three bullets, and I'm looking at number one, if we just sent in the request to the government to see if it would be funded. And also I do like the comments of asking for more. So I just thought that's my input. Thanks.
Thank you for your input. Mr. Robbins.
The recommendation that it be recommended to the board on February 22nd, 2023, that the Cowichan Valley Regional District make a funding request to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs in the amount of $60,000 under the Local Government Restructure Planning Grant Program for reasonable costs in undertaking a governance and services study for areas A, B, and C, the South Cowichan, and the South Cowichan Governance and Services Study rationale attached and form part of this report be endorsed and forwarded to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs as part of the funding request. And 3, that a 2023 supplemental request for Function 130 electoral feasibility studies in the amount of $190,000 for an Area A, B, and C restructure and incorporation study funded $70,000 from reserves and $120,000 through requisition be approved.
Thank you. So,
separate?
hang on just a sec. You want to separate each of these items? Sever, sorry. It's getting a little challenging here. I just wanted to pose the question. You want severing, you don't want to amend? There's nothing you want to amend in this resolution? Director Acton? No? Okay, so, yeah, clearly, because I think these are pretty much linked. So, Ms. Miles Wilson.
Yes, sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarity, the third point does need to be revised to reflect Function 250, not 130. It means the same and that all electoral areas are going to pay for it. So, but that.
Sorry, can't hear.
That change from Function 130 to 250 does need to be made. The other point I wanted to make is that in submitting the rationale to the provincial government, they want clarity that we are ready to move forwards with the study, which means resourcing on our end would need to be confirmed before they would confirm their funding. That's my understanding.
Yeah, so that's why I'm questioning the idea of severing they are linked, are they not? Please.
Okay, so since we're making a budget decision then with this, could I ask, so budget 250 electoral area directors went through quite closely. And we just have a policy of the 2 to 4 months, which we could waive. Is there any reserves in 250, or are you able to let me know on that one?
Ms. Bowen.
Through the chair to Director Acton, I did a quick analysis and you only have like 50,000. You've already committed funds to move over into the budget for 2023, and you've also committed to start putting money away for the next election. So you've already committed funds from and there's only 50,000 left in Function 250.
Sorry, I didn't hear that response, Chair. Sorry about
To
that.
recap, there's only about $50,000 in Function 250's reserves at this point. So here's where I'd like. Oh, okay, so we have the part 3, do we need to amend it, or can we just agree it's amended?
You had it on the, was it moved and seconded?
Yes, and you read it. So
it was moved.
it was moved and seconded. So, motion to amend to insert 250 instead of 130, moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Segal. Call the question, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. One opposed? Okay, so here, folks, I think it's important that we call the question on this as presented by our professional staff who are telling us this is a linked series of resolutions. I want to call the question. Do you have something new to add?
I have a question. If there are only $50,000 in the reserve for 250, then should that not be reflected in the?
Ms. Mohan or Ms. Bowen?
Through the chair to Director Nicholson, that is correct. You're going to have to drop that from 70 down to 50.
Mr. Robbins, would you read the suggested amended information, now that we've changed the number, the wording?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, and to the committee, we would suggest that Part 3 read that the Area A, B, and C restructure incorporation study be funded through Function 250 Electoral Area Services 2023 requisition and any available reserves as per the operational reserves policy. That is substantially different, and I would suggest that you will need to, if you want to consider this, now that you have a motion on the table, is to defeat that and reconsider or consider this change, because this substantially changes the motion on the table.
Does everyone understand the instruction? It's recommended to defeat this motion. We'll reintroduce it with the new additional Part 3. No, right now. Everyone clear? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's defeated. So we have
May I introduce?
one and two are as they were. Mr. Robbins with the number 3.
Part 3, that the Area A, B, and C restructure incorporation study be funded through Function 250 Electoral Area Services 2023 requisition and any available reserves as per the operational reserves policy.
I'm looking to staff. There's a bit that was left off at the beginning. Was that left off on purpose? The supplemental request for, does that need to be part of the motion? So, you know what, here's what I'm gonna recommend. Let's go with what we've got here. There's a special board meeting tomorrow, is that what I'm hearing over there? Pass the resolution, let the staff get the wording exact, and we'll have an exact resolution to pass tomorrow, should it proceed through here. One vote for each of us. Do you have something to add, Ms. Bowen?
Chair, just a point of order. Are you suggesting we pass this? Are you saying we pass this?
No, I'm not. I'm saying that we've defeated and everybody can vote their conscience on this one. One person, one vote. Ms. Bowen.
So through the chair, yes. So we would request that that supplemental part be added, because then tomorrow you can bring it back to the budget meeting that's happening tomorrow to have it approved and added to the budget.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Robbins is gonna do some tweaking here because we actually had the resolution reading to come forward to this afternoon, or the board meeting in 10 minutes. Aaron, you're rubbing your forehead. So,
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yeah, sorry.
And I'm sorry to bring this up, I know time is short, but I am still confused. I'm sorry, I am. What are we actually,
what's your point?
I don't know what my point is
Okay,
because
well,
I'm confused.
then don't call
What
a
have we
point of
actually-
order.
What have we called here? What have we agreed?
We don't have a resolution on the floor at this point.
We just had a defeat of something or other.
We just defeated a resolution that had some incorrect information. Now, we're working with staff
All right.
to correct this.
Can we defer it to the next meeting?
You won't be able to get it to a board.
Next meeting.
You understand that motion will maybe put in jeopardy the funding possibility.
Okay, to tomorrow?
So, order, everyone. Let's let our parliamentarian craft the resolution that is workable, that can be presented at tomorrow's board meeting. We don't like to do this thing on the fly, but I think he's got a good grasp of what we need to do. So I'll let him read the resolution. Are you ready? Are you ready? Everybody I'm not gonna sing and dance. Everybody take a deep breath. This is why I hate crafting stuff on the fly, but it happens. And everybody's still smiling, so that's good. Do you have to?
Can I? Can't we sever it then? We vote on the two issues and then figure out the funding
Do you
tomorrow?
want to risk putting the entire resolution at risk? What if one's defeated?
Well, I think people support the concept.
That's a very prophetic remark. The future is in our hands, and let's make sure that everybody's very clear as to what the vote will be, or what the resolution will be. I think this has been the messiest discussion and resolution that we've had this term so far. Way to go.
Mr. Chair, just a clarity, is it the desire to have this before the board following this meeting? Or do you want it tomorrow? Okay. So, for your consideration, that it be recommended to the board on February 23rd, 2023, that one, the Cowichan Valley Regional District make a funding request to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs in the amount of $60,000 under the Local Government Restructure Planning Grant Program for reasonable costs and undertaking a governance and services study for areas A, B, and C, the South Cowichan, and the South Cowichan Governance and Services Study rationale attached and forming part of this report be endorsed and forwarded to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs as part of the funding request. And three, a 2023 supplemental request for Function 250 in the amount of $190,000 for an Area A, B, and C restructuring incorporation study funded through requisitioned and any available reserves as per the operational reserves policy.
Do we have a mover and a seconder? Director Douglas.
I'm sorry, I know everyone wants to wrap this up, but I thought we were getting away from the word incorporation and focusing more on governance. This says restructuring incorporation study. Just a bit confused.
Restructure planning grant.
It says restructuring incorporation study.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Miles Wilson?
Yes, that's just the title of the report as drafted, but I think the content and the rationales explicit that this is a governance study. Incorporation, of course, would be one of the options considered. Yeah, we can change the wording, but it means the same, yeah.
And part of the rationale here is to get something to the board tomorrow. Director Acton, do you have something further to add? Would someone like to move the resolution? Do we have a seconder? We have it moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Hands up high, please.
Yeah.
Change glasses here.
We're going to decide tomorrow how to fund it. You can kill it tomorrow.
One, two, three, four, five, seven. I see seven. I see
Let's
seven.
count the opposed.
And can I have the hands of, and may I have the hands for
Opposed?
opposed, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Motion's defeated. Motion, entertain a motion to, oh, should we try and get question period done now? Question period? Yep.
Okay.
So, no unfinished business, no new business, question period. Would anyone in the gallery please like to pose a question to the chair in regards to items that have transpired today?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Can you see the gratitude on my face for the educational opportunity today? And I would just like to ask if there's any, especially to the people listening online, is there any constraints to presenting a community discussion through the means that we have to host Zooms in our community of Area B? On this topic
That's
of
a
our
hard question
core.
to answer for the Chair, clearly community groups can do whatever community groups want to do. I think that a step back and a look at what future of this initiative will be a further discussion of this committee or the board.
And just to follow up, would there be any interest in having the affected area directors be a participant on that panel?
I think you
Yeah.
would have to individually
Okay.
approach those directors.
Well, for the record, I just want to say again, thank you for this opportunity. It's been most educational.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to pose a question to the chair?
Mr. Chair, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Mr. Chair, a big part of this, I think, is communication with the public. Can we have a write-up put in by the CVRD on what your plans are? Have that put in the CVRD portion of the citizen.
Well, Mr. Evans, I would suggest that when a motion is defeated, it ends. So there's no plans. So at this point, I would reach out to the area directors directly as to what their thoughts may be about coming back and approaching this board about, or this committee about future plans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, but I still think that the community should know about this and take this into consideration. Don't you?
Well, it's not up to me to decide what the community needs or not. The resolution has failed. So it is, if the community wants to go online and view the debate that was had, it was a fairly fulsome one, and they've always got access to their individual directors for further clarification, and they could possibly reach out to staff as well for maybe some of the more technical details.
Mr. Chair, I understand that it was defeated, but may we have some CVRD communication with the public on this?
I'll check with staff, but really, we've got so much on our plate, and our folks are so busy. It would be, asking them to, or directing them to engage in work that, on something that essentially isn't moving forward. So at this point, I think you've got great resources in your electoral area directors who are very good at communicating with their communities, and I think that would be your path forward, and that's what I would recommend.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. When are we going to have our zoning done for Area B?
It's certainly not on the agenda and not a question that I can answer today.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Robbins, what are we going to do next? No? Oh, okay, another one. And directors don't respond here. Please come forward. Do you have a question for the chair?
I do. Good afternoon. I have a question and some comments related to the affordable housing crisis, if I may.
It's not an item on our agenda today.
Okay, I thought I had an understanding that I was going to address the board today with Rebecca. May I? I have 3 minutes.
At the board meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, you're at the committee of the whole, and
I
we're
see.
working on a
Okay,
very
I
different
thought
agenda.
okay, I thought I was late.
You're a keener. Way to go. We like guys like you.
I'll hold
Right
my
on.
tongue for...
Appreciate you coming and appreciate you hanging on. What's our next step here, because we have closed? Mr. Robbins, help me.
Mr. Chair, I'd suggest that you consider a resolution under the closed session, go into closed, recess.
Seconder, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Move to recess until after board.
Seconder, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried.